So, good afternoon, everybody. I have to say, following on from the scientific talks, you probably are wondering, what am I going to talk about in terms of knowledge transfer? But before I actually talk about knowledge transfer at CERN, having heard lots of things, interesting things yesterday and today, I wanted to go back, long back to history, as far back as Aristotle, who said, all men desire knowledge. I hope that in the 21st century we can say all men and women desire knowledge, okay? The thirst for knowledge is really, is part of our genes, if you like, okay? And the second thing I wanted to say is that we've also been dealing, and we've heard a lot about the Millennium Development Goals. The first one, of course, is the eradication of poverty and hunger. And when the MDGs were first established, the task force that was looking at the MDGs stated that without the intervention of science, technology, and innovation, it would be impossible to meet the development goals. Okay? Now, we know that the development goals are coming to their deadline very soon, and we have made lots of progress, and there are still some ways to go. And the heads of states and government in 2005, knowing the fact that these Millennium Development Goals are key to us, to all of us on this earth, they set up a special annual ministerial review, which started with the very first one, which was MDG 1, poverty and eradication. And the reason I mention this is that this year in July, the AMR is meeting, and their particular subject this year is science, technology, and innovation, and to see what we've done right and how we can try to meet our international agreed goals. Okay? So I think that the idea of sharing knowledge and what we are doing, I mean, I think is part of a bigger global part. And for me, what is interesting coming from CERN is the fact that I and actually all of us who collaborate with CERN, we are very, very fortunate that we do wonderful research, as you've already heard from my previous two colleagues. But part of this linked with this is that CERN considers knowledge and technology transfer as an integral part of its mission. I mean, that's part of its really, that's needed, and we do. We try to do the best we can. And the fact that the technologies have applications in several domains with high relevance to society. And I'm looking at particularly in health, so the second part of my few slides will mention about health, but I want to do a little bit of global coverage, so to speak. And of course, actually the third point is showing tangible results to society from key applications is important for us, actually our funding agencies, our governments, because this is, we are in pursuit for knowledge, but we need to show the fundamental role of research as a driver of innovation. Because if we cannot, of course, we have problems getting funding to do what we want to do. And I think Patrick had already said that CERN is an education and training center. We feel that it's part of our duty because we talk about science as sort of knowledge hub, trying to move forward, but that means we want the best young people to be doing science. And how do we make that happen? We make sure that our teachers actually really stimulate the young people, educate them, and so that they will study research. So we not only do we have training center for fellows, for PhDs, for senior scientists, but also for teachers, really to make them really interested in the subject they are teaching so that they can encourage and stimulate young people, okay? And CERN as a catalyzer for collaboration, which I'm definitely going to come to later, because in the health field, catalyzing collaboration is really key. And so the tools for our trade, I think will not spend too much time on this. Accelerators, detectors, computing, and of course, everybody has more or less has been hearing a lot about Tim Berners-Lee and brain behind the web, and the Olympics last year really emphasized the key role in technology in this. And by the way, who would have thought that the opening Olympic ceremony would actually have a physics innovation as the key star? That's quite something. Okay, so accelerator technologies, I quickly go through this because I think I really want to come to some of the other points. So we have accelerated detectors, of course. I just want to mention for the detector Medipix, which is a single photon counting device. Yes, it's very nice, it's a collaboration, but you know, coming from where I am, one of the things that's really important is that it's evolved in medical applications, it's transferred to society, it's done some nice things, and actually now it's being used back in physics. But interestingly, also, this little device has managed to stimulate an awful lot of young school kids. And we had the TED event last week at CERN, and Becky Parker, who is one of the school teachers who really has pushed this device, she was talking about it. So these young guys, kids actually, who've been working on this, have sent this out to space, and they're getting all this data, and then actually it's really generating a lot of excitement and interest in science. And so as a technology which you might not even think about that it could be practical in day-to-day, from high vacuums, from the neg film coating, to solar energy, to actually solar panels plant. And last year, the Geneva airport is actually installed these solar panels so that it's heating and light is starting to rely on this. And of course, we have lots of solar panels and solar power, but this is really state of the art because it's on high vacuum, highly polished, so it's actually, they last for a long time and they are very, very efficient. And it's really coming basically from our physics technologies. And I wanted to just mention this thing about the KT fund, and this came up to me yesterday because Jan Kapp yesterday was talking about radon detectors and so on. I thought, well, I should put this little bit. It's not a huge amount of money. We just catalyze it by just giving a little bit of funding. And what we do is we look at requests from researchers which are evaluated for impact on society at large, not necessarily for particle physics. And this last time we funded 2 things, and one of them was a cheap sensitive radon detector. Okay, so this would be portable, it would be small, and of course we do not have funding for the whole thing, but just to look at the feasibility and teaching tools for, again, for high school students, but also primary school teachers as well. And I just thought that I might actually mention, everybody of course knows about the World Wide Web and many things, but I don't know if you are aware of the fact that the first touch screen came from CERN, the first mouse. And actually this one is our latest little baby, the open hardware license. I think a lot of you know about open access and open software license, but CERN is now trying to promote and push and help with the hardware license in the same way as the open access movement. And I mean, that is really within our spirit of how CERN collaborates, okay? And then now, of course, I'm going to my first love, which is CERN technologies. You look at you, I'll try not to. Okay, so I wanted to touch a little bit, and I know that we are trying to deal with technologies for doing day-to-day challenges in Africa, other developing countries, and globally. However, I think it's also important that we also have the possibility to dream and to think about the future and how those technologies are moving, so that the gap and the knowledge and the gap and doing is true. What Jan Kapp said yesterday, that we do have a lot of technologies and sometimes it's the doing part that's missing. But while we are doing, I think it's important to also keep ahead of the game and see where the new technologies are coming up as well. So I want to just touch a little bit on how these technologies are being used in one of our societal challenges, which is cancer. And why do I want to talk about cancer? It's a large and growing challenge. And the best way and to get really improve our prognosis, you need early diagnosis, you need better control, you need fewer side effects, okay? And how do we do that? And you will hear some nice technology from the speaker straight after me about one way of doing this, is really we need better imaging, better treatment planning, better accelerators, understanding, radiobiology is really advanced health informatics. We need all of those things. And actually, what we need in the health field, just like the physicists do very well, by the way, I'm the only sort of biologist at CERN who does this, is this international collaboration. If you really want to maintain progress, you want to really move ahead. And interestingly, although cancer is a common condition, each tumor is individual. You need a personalized approach, and you need lots of patient data to be able to understand the key drivers of the disease. And so one of my roles is in sort of catalyzing collaboration in this field. And I mean, I think that there's not too many medical doctors, but just to say, I always have an interesting thing is that physicists and physicians are very close in their spelling, but they are not really that close in the way they think and their philosophy. And but you know, you cannot blame the physicians because they are taking care of people. It's people's health. They cannot afford to wait maybe 20 years for an experiment, or if something doesn't quite work, it doesn't matter, but you know, because they have different concerns. And they have to be conservative. And whereas my physicist colleagues, they are wonderful. They're always looking for the smallest, the fastest, whatever, and you know, and really making the quantum leaps. So somewhere in between, how to bring this together in terms of collaboration is really, really needed, so we can meet some of these challenges and benefit for some of the technologies we've just been hearing about and some of the others that are happening. And CERN is actually quite well placed to do this, so I'm very lucky that I have this role, because we have wonderful technologies. We are known to be a catalyst for collaborations, as you will have seen from Patrick's map right at the beginning. And you know, we are an international organization, we are non-commercial, and we are not a hospital. So people don't feel competed by me when I'm trying to do this. They don't think I'm trying to steal their thunder. And so for cancer treatment, conventional radiation therapy in the 21st century, I mean, there are sort of so-called the 3 C's of radiation. The cure rate, it cures quite well either alone or in combination. It's conservative, it's mostly non-invasive, particularly the external radiation therapy, but you will hear something else from the following speaker. Few side effects, and it's actually quite cheap. Most people don't realize that about 5% of the total cost for cancer is on radiation, and yet we get a pretty good value for money. But we have a problem, and that is that there isn't a substitute for radiation therapy. The number of cancer patients are going up for 2 reasons, and one of the reasons we are living longer and we have better diagnostics, okay? And the other could be some other reasons of our exposures, but I will not discuss that at a moment. And there's no real substitute for radiation therapy. And yet, the present limitation is that in about 30% of the cancers, about a third of the patients, the cancer comes back to where it was, okay? And the reason is, I just will be very, you know, just a sketch diagram to say that, so here, if your tumor is here, in order to kill the tumor, you want 100% of the energy, okay? So if you radiate with X-rays, which is the conventional radiation therapy, there's a lot of radiation before and radiation afterwards. And then, oops. And then if you try to use 2 fields to try to get 100% at the tumor site, you give more than you need on surrounding tissues. So the problem is that in order to protect the healthy tissues, you use all sorts of strategies to limit the damage, and that also means reducing the effectiveness of the tumor, of the actual tumor treatment, okay? So this is my little bit of physics that I would like to show, that where the future of some of the technologies are. And one of them is, oops, sorry, is that, I didn't, okay. That Bob Wilson, who was the director of Fermilab, as far back as 1946, suggested being able to use hadrons, that's the same hadrons as in our Large Hadron Collider, the protons, that they could be used clinically. We could accelerate because the accelerators are available, and they have a nice little property, which is if you use electrons and photons, you see that most of the energy is deposited very close to the surface, like 2 or 3 centimeters, whereas hadrons is something called the Bragg peak, and you can actually situate it where your tumor is, okay? So it's very nice, and there's a little sort of schematic thing. But of course, you might wonder if this is such a wonderful thing, and it was said in 1946, and we are now 2013, Why don't we have a lot of these things, and why aren't we treating lots of patients this way? Well, here is a little reason, one of the reasons that could be. So it started as far back as 1946. The first patient was treated in 1954 in Berkeley. And by the way, it's probably not an accident that the first patient was treated in Berkeley, because one of the Lawrence brothers was the brain behind the cyclotron, and the other Lawrence brother happened to be a medical doctor. And the combination of the physicist and the physician working together ended up treating the first patient. And actually, the first patient was their mother. And actually, it's not bad, because you don't have to get clearance from anybody, at least, okay? And there is a lot of historical evidence for doing these type of collaborations, from the discovery of X-rays to the Curies and so on, okay? And then also, because you're talking about treating patients with hadrons, so protons, carbon ions, argon, neon, and so on, where do you think you find a place for making such particles? High-energy physics laboratories, okay? Because that's where most of the basic research was done, until you had the first clinical facility, dedicated facility, Loma Linda, just outside LA in 1992. So up till then, most of this research was done thanks to our colleagues letting us have beam time to do what we were doing. Okay, so that's one of the reasons. And the second reason is, of course, photons and electrons are much lighter than protons and carbon ions. So the machines that you need to accelerate these things are bigger and more expensive and more complex. And all the things which, of course, are very important in the health field, because its cost is important, of course, okay? So where you might wonder what CERN came into it, CERN actually was involved by some of the member states asked us, well, not me, our physicist colleagues, that what would be a greenfield study of proton ion medical machine study. So if money and space was not a problem, what would it look like? And this was a PIM study done from 96 to 2000. And of course, in the tradition of CERN, it's a yellow report. You can find it on the web. It's openly available. And this was the basis which has been used by Ugo Amaldi from Terra, who modified it. And the first facility based on this started treating patients in Pavia, which is near Milan. And the second facility, which is being built now in Austria, just outside Vienna, should start treating patients in something like 2015. And the other thing I want to say is that when people started, when this study finished, of course, some of the member states wanted to build such a facility. And that's not so easy, because it's complex. It's based on this big technology, big collaborations, and so on. So they were asking CERN, could we help to catalyze something so such a facility would happen? And I was fortunate enough that in 2000, I arrived from Berkeley to CERN, and I was asked to look after some of these things. And it was rather odd that I should come from Berkeley, where the first patient was treated, and I ended up being involved in this field at CERN. And the thing is, so hadron therapy or radiation therapy in general is really multidisciplinary, from all the way from diagnostics, imaging, planning, follow-up, and you really need the integration and synergy between clinics, R&D, and so on. And so that's what happened, is that when I was asked to lead this collaboration, what we said is, well, why don't we try to make a multidisciplinary collaboration followed on the principles of CERN? So that's what ENLIGHT is. It's a CERN's export of CERN's philosophy into the health field. And by the way, and it might make you laugh a little bit, ENLIGHT is European Network for Light Ion Hadron Therapy. Now, when we called these particle carbons light, all the biologists was really upset because they are heavy, okay? And if we call them hadrons, the particle physicists, I mean, medical doctors don't know what a hadron is, okay? So we can't agree on even terminology, because we talk about different things, and somehow we put people together to try to make sure that we meet the challenge of what's going on. And actually, so we have managed to make a multi-disciplinary platform, which is really identifying challenging, sharing knowledge, best practices, And I think that Richard, you will tell us how difficult it is for doctors to try to get that harmonized data, train, educate. I mean, it's crazy, I can tell you. But it's something really, really important that is needed in all aspects, whether it's an energy challenge or it's an environment challenge or it's a health challenge. If we could come together, this would be, if one could somehow package that. And so last year, we had our 10th anniversary of the Enlight Network, and it's still carrying on, and people realize the value of it. So although it's difficult, people want to continue, okay? And then now, so there are a few facilities that are treating patients. I'm almost finished. But there are other new countries who would like to be able to have these facilities. So they don't want to start from point zero. They don't have beam time even to do basic radiobiology. And they would like to think about the future where these facilities could be smaller, cheaper, and actually easier to run, because we don't really need sort of large synchrotron. Well, we have them at the moment. We would like something simpler to use, because it can't be a physics laboratory experiment. It has to be within a clinical setting. So in order to thinking about the future of this next generation of particle therapy, which could be smaller, cheaper, more compact, etc., and also which particles would be the ones that one should really treat, which type of detectors, which type of instruments, and where to do that. So one of the things that the community is asking us is, can CERN try to provide such a facility where people could come together and do their basic research and learn from each other? So one of the things we're trying to work on is use LEAR, which is kind of ironic, low energy ionization ring, which is one of the small things we use to fill our large hadron collider with protons, and most of the time it's not being used. So the idea is that when it's not being used to fill the large hadron ring, that we should use this as a biomedical infrastructure for the community at large, both for collaboration and doing future research. So that's, and really bring people together. I think that's the important part. And so basically preparing for the future is the objectives are to bring people together, decide where the challenges are, explore synergies, catalyze collaborations, and move on as we are moving in the physics community. And what happened is that actually, in 2010, CERN held the first workshop, Physics for Health, and this became it was really a small conference which we held at CERN, and within about 6 months, the person who actually chaired the ICTR, which is the International Conference on Translational Research in Radio-Oncology, it means from the lab to bed for treating patients. He came to see me, he said, I sat in your meeting, I think it's exactly what we would like to do. Could we just come together so that we could have such things together that we bring both communities? And so we had the one in 2012, and the next one is going to be from the 10th and 14th of February 2014. I have some flyers and some information about this, and it's really doing what we need now, but also keeping an eye on the future. That's the idea. And the slides will be there. Anyway, it's all the links so that you can find any information you like, anything you need, everything is on there. If you need something, you can also send me a message, and I thank you for your attention.